This show may contain adult language and themes. Listener discretion is advised. With that out of the way, let's start the show. You're listening to the Murder Is My Sign podcast, the only true crime astrology podcast, and I'm your host, Jordy Death, here to light your way through the true crime astrology storm. And in studio with me again is Mr. Kyle. Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing great. We've dropped all nicknames for you, and we're just going to refer to you as Kyle or Mr. Kyle or Lord Kyle or whatever you wish, because you don't like nicknames apparently.
I don't mind nicknames, but Killer Kyle is not among my top 5 ever.
Fine. Okay, fine. Yes, I understand.
I would just like to say something, though, before we start.
Yes.
You know, obviously we're in the midst of this entire coronavirus thing.
Yeah.
And I just want to say to anybody out there, I hope everybody's at home or safe and you're healthy and... you know, there's a lot of turbulent times coming and have gone, and I hope everybody that's being affected by this, which is pretty much everybody, I hope you're dealing with that pretty okay.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that because I definitely wanted to start this episode, you know, by saying the same thing, and I hope that you guys out there that are listening are really taking care of yourself. And if you listen to the April Fool's Day episode I did yesterday, hopefully you guys like that. We are not going to an ASMR. We're definitely not going to be doing that. That was actually a lot harder for me to, and that is how I'm going to get coronavirus, with you rubbing your nose all over my microphone. Thank you. It was a lot harder to record that than I thought because, like, having to talk in a whisper or, like, talk softly really required me to slow down.
You should have talked to me. I'm excellent at talking too quietly.
Yes. So, but seriously, I hope you guys are really taking care of yourselves. We're going to be starting our new topic for April today. The main overarching theme that we'll be discussing throughout this series is mental health and mental health advocacy. And if you've been listening to my podcast for any length of time, you know that I am a huge proponent of mental health and taking care of yourself. My mother is a psychotherapist. I myself have struggled with depression for many years, and I am proud to say that I am doing much better thanks a lot to bupropion, because that has definitely helped me. And I know that helps some people, it doesn't help other people, but I just want to take the shame out of being medicated. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Mental health is so important, especially during these turbulent times. So if you guys are struggling, please reach out to either a trusted friend, a family member, or even Google. Like, if you Google your local municipality and free mental health, I know a lot of people out there doing either phone sessions or video sessions. I know my mom's doing that. So resources are out there for you. Really take the time, you know, while you're sheltering in place or quarantined, or especially if you're having to work. Like, you know, like I know you are working, Kyle, because
right.
You're, what's the word? You are a needed member of society, or?
I'm an essential member.
You are an essential member of society, yes. You are essential, and I am not.
I would also like to say what she's saying about mental health. You know, every county that you live in has a crisis hotline. Everyone is different, but Google, you just pick your county and pick the crisis hotline, and if there's people there that are willing to listen, and there's people that are willing to hook you up with the resources and the help that you need.
I just found out today that, unfortunately, I am furloughed until April 30th, which is pretty stressful, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
I've already applied for unemployment and things like that, and unfortunately I heard that some of my colleagues were just flat laid off. So I'm really hoping that our state will open back up at the end of April and that I can actually go back to my job and things like that, because if I'm laid off, so basically it's like everyone who was hired after me got let go.
Yeah.
And I've only been there for 2 years. And my 2-year anniversary literally happened the day that we shut our doors for good.
Wow.
Yeah. So I didn't get my
not for good.
No, not for good.
Indefinitely.
Yeah. So I did not get my one-on-one. I don't know if I'm going to get my raise. I'm really hoping that happens, because prior to all this, I did work very hard and I really enjoyed my job and things like that. But what I'm getting at is prior to all of this, I knew that we'd be home for an extended period of time. So what I did is, one of the perks of working at a bookstore is I was able to check out, kind of like a library, some of the books that I knew we would need for our research. And, I keep talking about this, but we haven't even mentioned what we're talking about. So if you're smart, if you put two and two together, chances are that that we're going to be covering the Columbine Killers, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. And the reason why it's in April is
420.
Yeah, that is the day. April 20th, 1999 is the day of the Columbine shooting. So this particular series, I think, is going to prove very difficult and interesting. It's a weird combination because we are covering a lot of very triggering topics. And I usually don't do this a whole lot in my episodes. I think I can count on one hand me actually going ahead and saying an actual trigger warning. And I will usually always do that if it involves small children or rape. And in this case, I'm going to say that there's going to be a big trigger warning for a lot of this series because we're going to be talking about mental health and suicide. And it's not just Dylan and Eric who killed themselves, but as we've done our research, there have been ripple effects of survivors who have, taken their own lives. And I know we'll talk about, I'm sure, survivor's guilt and things like that. So just so you guys know, I know probably true crime during this very crazy time isn't the best thing that you guys want to be listening to, but I really hope that Kyle and I can provide some humor, I suppose, because we do both have kind of dark sense of humor.
It's the thing about dark topics where, I worked with prisoners for a long time, multiple child molesters, I've had people kill themselves, multiple murderers, people that have chopped up family members.
Jesus Christ.
And it's one of
Wisconsin.
those...
Fucking tell you that, man.
It's one of those things where, I developed a severely dark sense of humor as a result of that. I don't think that's very unusual. No, I don't. I think when you work a high stress job like that, even when I was working as a mortician, I know a lot of morticians who have a very dark sense of humor because it's a coping mechanism. Okay, so because I'm on furlough, the 3 books I checked out from work were World War Z, which I'm still reading. Fabulous book.
So I'm gonna have to burn through that really quick. I checked out
burn through that.
Yeah, it's really funny. I checked out Columbine by David Cullen, and then A Mother's Reckoning, Living in the Aftermath of Tragedy by Sue Klebold. So this series is going to be a little bit different than the previous ones, especially the ones that you and I have done, Kyle. I don't really have a script. You and I have both been kind of doing our own research on this. I have a couple of notes here in my book, so you guys might be hearing some paper ruffling, things like that, as we kind of flip through these different pages and stuff to bring up our points. And so we're kind of going to have to do rapid succession because I do have a little bit of time, but I do need to return these books within, probably 2 weeks or so. Anywho, I also have a Newsweek article from May 3rd, 1999. So basically a week after this happened, or a couple of days after the event. Maybe 2 weeks after the event. So what I kind of want to accomplish in this episode, because we followed a pattern where, the first episode's always the background information of the individual, how they grew up, things like that, leading up to the main event in the second episode, covering the main event, what happened up to the arrest, if there was an arrest. And then the third episode would be the arrest and after effects, and then going into the star signs. So we're going to be kind of doing the same thing here. In this episode, we're going to be covering our memories of where we were when we found out about Columbine, kind of share our thoughts about that. And then we'll be also talking about the research that the things that we've learned about Dylan and Eric and the events leading up to April 20th. And then talking about that, we'll be referencing the Newsweek article quite a bit, but I think in the second episode, especially the third, especially from reading the Columbine book, we're going to see how much the Newsweek article, how much stuff they got wrong.
And that's actually what I'm most interested about because I really haven't done too much research. Yeah. It's one of those things that I was about 13 when that happened. Okay. So I was finishing up 8th grade going into high school. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things people talked about it a lot and it was on the news constantly. This is 3 years before 9/11.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Or 2 years before 9/11. 2001, so that's 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years and some odd months.
So it was one of those where it's like other things took its place, but you saw so much for so long, and there was so much bullshit. Like, even when I was a kid, talking about violent video games and violent music and trying to blame other people for what, you know what I mean? Instead of, like, kind of like how it is now.
Right, exactly. Like, it's crazy.
Instead of having decent mental health services for sick people that's cheap and affordable, we blame everybody else.
Right. Well, and it's so crazy. Like, with all the misinformation that was going on in the media, like, when this first broke, like, after the first shots happened, I think it took the news station about 30 minutes before they started coming on with the news about this. So it's so crazy to hear, like, all the misinformation of, like, the wrong body counts and things like that. And how we can parallel
reports of a third gunman.
Right.
I remember very early on they said there was 3 and the only 2 died, and they're still looking for the third one.
Right. And it's just like the same shit happened during the Milwaukee Brewery shooting, and then also all the shit that's going on with COVID-19, all the misinformation. Like,
it's almost exacerbated now because of social media.
Yeah,
and
it's so much worse.
That make money off of lying. I mean, people have always made money off of lying, but the internet has made it so much easier to make money off of. I mean, like, we could lie and say whatever the fuck we want here right now, and it's a way to make money off of it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those. It's disturbing how it's.
It is.
Tailspun.
And this is why it's so fucking important, you know, to do your own research, to cite your fucking sources. And if it has a .com, I swear to God, you need to have another backup to that. A .org or .gov.
Hey, I tell you what, APA, if you try to cite a source in the APA, .com, it better be from a good There's good .coms and there's bad .coms.
And I will give props to Wikipedia. It has gotten a lot more credible, especially if you go down to the sources, because everything in the Wikipedia page should be sourced at some extent, and that way you can just kind of follow that and kind of go backwards, I suppose. But yeah, it's crazy. Back in 1999, I was 8. I was in elementary school. And I was living in Eau Claire at the time. I remember definitely Columbine was like the first really big news thing I remember watching. And the biggest image that sticks out in my mind when I think of Columbine is that overhead shot from the helicopter and the students with their hands behind their head running out.
Yep.
And I remember, I think when I was in high school, like, we started doing, like, lockdown drills because of Columbine and, like, active shooting drills and stuff like that. We didn't do a whole lot because I graduated in 2009, which was the 10-year anniversary of Columbine. And in my time being there, we only went on lockdown once, but that was after school, and it was, like, musical auditions, and there was an active shooter, or gunshots were fired, like, a block or two away from the school. Like, it was like a domestic dispute, but because it was so close to our school, they, like, locked us down, which made sense. So that was equal parts thrilling and terrifying.
I can imagine that.
But beyond that, in college, we didn't really have any active shooter drills or anything like that.
We didn't have to. I went to a college that was designed by a Japanese prison.
Jesus!
A guy who designed prisons in Japan. Like, the building that I went to school in, one of the schools I went to, it was pretty much riot proof.
Wow.
Glass walls 40 feet high. Shit you could drive a tank through.
That's crazy.
Like, all the deans, you had to get all the deans' offices, you couldn't get there by staircase. They all had an elevator, and you needed a key to operate the elevator to get up to where all the deans' offices were.
Yeah. I think now most schools have, like, metal detectors. I mean, it's been forever since I've been in either an elementary school or a high school.
I haven't been in a high school. Actually, I had to go get my high school transcripts for some job I did about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've been in high school.
Yeah.
In a high school.
So if you are still somehow enrolled in high school or you teach at a high school or whatever, please, by all means, email the show. I'd love to hear what the security precautions are like now. I remember a couple of weeks ago when I was working, one of my colleagues, Dan, who is a teacher in Sheboygan, Green Bay, that area, that was when there was an active shooter. And, you know, they went on lockdown, and then they, you know, basically GTFO'd. And he was kind of talking about how he was debating about either staying in class with his kids or trying to get everyone out. And I think he said that he was closer to an exit. So they ran outside and ran to like the elementary or middle school that was like nearby. And then I also remember during that shooting, I think it was just a security guard that was hurt and also the shooter. I don't think anyone was killed. I remember also in the news a Muslim girl opening up the mosque.
Oh, that's right, the mosque across the street from the school.
Yep, and she got a lot of people in.
Did you see that guy, the teacher, that the kid brought a shotgun to school and he was going to kill himself, and he took the shotgun away from the kid and he hugged him until the police, like he wrapped his arms around him and he hugged him until he was a football coach, something like that. I don't know, he just got the Civilian Congressional Medal of Honor for that. That happened a couple months ago, but I just read that he got the Civilian Medal of Honor.
Good for him.
Yeah.
And that's such a powerful thing too. And this is why I feel like we're in such a dangerous time right now too. It's because of social distancing and not being able to hug people or show affection. And hug and physical affection is so important, especially not only to your mental health, but like to grieving and to like, I'm a very physical, touchy-feely person, and I'm very blessed that we have the ability that you and I can be together in like the same room. You don't have to worry about that. But like the family.
But do we?
But do we? I don't know. I'm sequestered at home. You're the one who has to work, so
That's true.
Yeah, thankfully you don't really work with the public.
It's more dangerous for me, though.
It is more dangerous for you, which is why this whole COVID-19 the situation's fucked up.
God damn, we took a huge fucking left turn.
Yeah, we did. So let's get into it. So we've already kind of talked about, where we were when this happened, our memories of the event. Let's start talking about, I guess, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, the two perpetrators.
It's funny, it's arguably the things I know the least about. The things I know about them are circa 1999, 2000, and I don't even know how accurate those things are. I really have not read too much since then because so much other things have happened since then. I mean, especially 9/11. Like, after that, like,
sure,
it was just a domino effect of other crazy shit to deal with.
Right. Well, it's one of those things, like, even though Columbine was, I hate to say it, like, such a pivotal thing, it's more or less like the gold standard of school shootings. It's
the godfather of school shootings.
Right, which is crazy because like years before this, there had been other school shootings.
Oh, plenty.
And in this Newsweek article, it actually talks about those various school shootings that happened beforehand.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's like every other week since Columbine, every other month, there's been like another school shooting. So because I have Sue Klebold's book here, obviously there's going to be more information on...
Have you ever seen her TED Talk?
Yeah, we literally just watched that. Yeah, that's a really good... I'm glad you brought that up. She I thought she was very... her TED Talk was about mental health.
Right.
And the importance of it. And, sitting there listening to it, I can't hate her. Like, I just cannot hate her because my heart just breaks for her, the fact that she's enduring this incredible amount of pain, not only to lose her son to suicide, but in such a horrific way. And that people just blame her. Like, how couldn't you tell? Like, why couldn't you see the signs there? And things like that. And, like, we'll get into that as we continue.
Right.
But I haven't really heard, or granted, I haven't really looked that deep yet, but as far as Eric Harris's parents, I haven't heard anything.
Well, that kid was a fucking... I mean, even back in the day, they knew... Like, even in the, 2000, where it was... Dylan Klebold was there, but even in 2000, they knew Eric Harris was a fucking psychopath.
Yeah. And it's crazy because in the book, especially in the Columbine book, which I have a couple of pages here marked. I have a lot of pages here marked. Let's start talking about Eric Harris then. So his full name is Eric David Harris, and he was born on April 9th, 1981 in Wichita, Kansas. And so April 9th, that makes him an Aries. So Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and they are the ram. So they are very impulsive, can also be very stubborn. And because they are the first sign of the zodiac, they kind of have like that older sibling vibe of me first type thing. And they definitely more or less kind of want to be the center of attention, and they have a lot of energy, but they don't always necessarily follow everything through. So those are the typical signs of Aries. Now, Dylan, he was born Dylan Bennett Klebold on September 11th, 1981 in Lakewood, Colorado. Now, September 11th, that is Virgo. And Virgos, they are an earth sign, and they're known as a virgin. And ironically enough, in season 1 of Murder's My Sign, in that serial killer list I had, majority of the serial killers were Virgos. Now, I have some theories about that, because when you Google, like, the serial killer list, you can get tons of different kind of lists with tons of different kind of names. But in the end, it kind of boiled down to Pisces and Virgos. And my thought is, Virgos are so uptight and so perfectionistic in their demeanor. Like, they want everything in its place. They want everything perfect. They're known as the virgin. So they want everything simple and pure and perfect. And when it doesn't fit that way, they, like, bottle everything up until they fucking snap. And so that's kind of like my going theory with why a lot of Virgos tend to be serial killers. But what do I know? That's just my theory. Anywho. So yeah, let's start with talking about Eric Harris, I guess, because he was a psychopath. Like, clinically a psychopath.
I mean, I remember, like, back, like, when I was a kid, they're talking about, like, you know, oh, they chose 420 because that's Hitler's birthday.
Yeah.
And the whole, like, they were big Nazi, like, aficionados and, like, yelling German things at their classmates when they were angry. Like, kind of like shit that would be, like, fucking warning signs now were just kind of, like, ignored. Yeah. Do you think that was because they were, like, affluent white kids? That's one of those questions where I don't know, like, now time, like,
right,
because, you know, Littleton, Colorado's an upscale area,
right?
You know what I mean? Like,
right,
you know, like, would that shit have flown in? I don't know. I don't know. I don't think anybody really is going to have a good answer for that.
No, question. But I think you do bring up a really good question, because both Eric and Dylan had parents that were married, middle class, both white, both.
I think one of their parents was in the military, like retired Air Force or retired Navy or something like that.
Yes, I have that written down somewhere. Eric's dad was U.S. Air Force.
Okay.
So they moved around a bit, but then settled in Littleton, Colorado. Yeah, so Eric's dad was in the Air Force and then retired and stuff. So they moved around quite a bit and then settled in Littleton, Colorado. Now, in the book Columbine, it does say that he was a complete psychopath. You know, you brought up a really good point, Kyle, with both of them growing up in, you know, middle-class America.
Upper middle class America,
you know, Colorado.
Like, I want to say, if I remember right, this is also one of those things I remember from when I was a kid. One of their parents, like, one of the families, they had, like, a collection of vintage BMWs that was, like, on their property. It's, like, not your average middle-class family. Like, people that had a little bit of money to them.
I can't speak to that because I haven't gotten that far in my research, but yeah, sure.
I just vaguely remember that when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Could well be wrong, but...
Yeah. Both Dylan and Eric were incredibly smart. Eric was, like, a straight-A student, and so, like, this is in the 90s, so computer science is becoming very, very big. They're both very much on their computers. Eric created his own websites, and his websites he used kind of as, like, a manifesto. Like, so both boys...
I vaguely remember, too, he had, like... Afterward, the police were like, "Oh, he has, like, super violent websites."
Right, because they documented everything. Yeah. Like, and we'll get to it in here in just a second, but Eric loved playing Doom, which is a very violent video game, but it's also one of my favorite video games.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, that's one of those things from this whole situation that I remember quite clearly is, like, politicians and everybody, they wanted to blame the parents, they wanted to blame... Marilyn Manson and quote-unquote violent music and violent video games without actually looking at the causes for, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like when that dude shot up that, also in Colorado, shot up that movie theater dressed as a Joker. It's like, do you really think if the Batman movie hadn't come out, like, that would have happened? You know what I mean? He would have done something.
Right.
Something else would have caused that.
Right.
But they wanted to scapegoat the fuck out of it. They wanted to find what caused this, without looking at the reasons.
Right, because they want to point the blame because that's simple and it's easy, and then you can move on from it. But there is really no reason for this. And, you know, Eric and Dylan documented everything in their journals. Eric had his websites, and they even would go and
do films together?
Yeah, I was just gonna get into that. They did basement videos at I think it was either Eric or Dylan's house, I can't remember, but they would videotape themselves just saying how much they fucking hated everyone, they fucking hated the world, and they wanted to kill everything and burn it all down.
I remember they would like write like short stories in school about killing their classmates, or like they filmed they filmed things about shooting their classmates, and like some like shit that would be like, are you kidding me? I can't believe that nobody saw this coming.
Right.
Thing.
So here's a little excerpt from the book Columbine that I just kind of want to read, and it's on the chapter called Psychopath. Eric was neither normal nor insane. Psychopathy represents a third category. Psychopathic brains don't function like those in either of the groups, but they are consistently similar to one another. Eric killed for 2 reasons: to demonstrate his superiority and to enjoy it. So Eric was very much the instigator about all this. Dylan was just depressed. He hated himself. He was in a lot of emotional pain. He just wanted to die. He didn't necessarily want to kill people, but because Dylan and Eric became very close friends, Eric was able to like instigate and get him on board. Dylan was very quiet. He was very shy. Eric was very outgoing. Eric could talk his way out of anything, basically. I get a lot of like Ted Bundy vibes from Eric. And he was actually surprisingly very good with the ladies. Like, he had a lot of dates. Of course, when it came to their senior prom, he had a bit of a struggle to find a date, which really pissed him off because Dylan actually had a date. So the weekend before the shooting was their prom.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. The principal, kind of did this whole big speech about, drinking and driving and taking care of yourself and how he didn't want anyone to die over the weekend and things like that. Only for them to come back. And then on that Tuesday, mass chaos and mass mortalities happened.
Oh.
Yeah. Pretty fucking crazy. Dylan was just very depressed and stuff, and in his journal he'd write about his emotional pain and things like that, and how he felt love towards this girl named Harriet, and how, it was kind of like one of those unrequited love type things. Whereas Eric just felt like he was owed the world, and if anyone had an issue with him, he would kill them, which is fucking terrifying. So here we go with the basement tapes, as we were kind of talking about. So this is taken from chapter 50 of the Columbine book called The Basement Tapes. Eric wanted to be remembered. He spent a year on, quote, the Book of God, but 5 weeks before Judgment Day, or April 20th, he decided that wasn't good enough. He wanted a starring role on camera, so on March 15th, he and Dylan began The Basement Tapes. It would be a tight shooting schedule with no time for editing or post-production. They filmed with a Sony 8mm camcorder checked out from the Columbine High School Video Lab. So they were really embracing technology, not only with instant messaging and starting their own websites, but they created these little tapes. And basically their first tape was kind of like a talk show, like how they had it set up. It was just a stationary tape, and it was in Eric's basement, outside of his bedroom. Eric joined Dylan on set. They kicked back in a plush velvet recliner, bantering about the big event, the shooting that was about to happen. Eric had a bottle of Jack Daniels in one hand, and he called his gun Arlene. So they were able to get these guns from various people that would buy for them. And this is back in the day where you could go to Kmart and buy like 2 boxes of bullets for $25.
Yeah, you could still buy ammunition at Walmart.
Eric and Dylan never did. It was a third person who bought them for them. He was later, and we'll probably get into this in like episode 3 maybe, but he was later brought up on charges, like criminal charges. Because there was a lot of lawsuits that were going on and things like that, so.
Because I was like, they were both under 18, so I don't know how they were. I mean, you gotta be 18 to buy ammunition, even in Colorado.
Yeah. And, we kind of talked about this. Dylan was incredibly depressed. He had a nickname called, and his nickname was Vodka, with D and K in uppercase. So, Vodka, because Dylan Klebold. And it was interesting because as I was reading this, I wrote down this note about how his drinking and his excessive drinking to like relax and kind of like just get out of what he was feeling reminded me so much of Jeffrey Dahmer. Because Jeffrey Dahmer was an alcoholic by the time he was like 17.
Right. Well, didn't he, when he killed the first person, wasn't he drunk?
Oh, yeah, he blacked out drunk. Yeah, totally. Dahmer
Like,
was.
bludgeoned him with like a weight or
Yeah,
something, right?
yeah, that was in Ohio. So in the basement videos, and they made multiple videos, but in this particular video, Eric raised his gun and aimed it at the camera and said, "You guys will all die, and it will be fucking soon. You all need to die. We need to die too." So, here's a thing that keeps like going in the back of my mind, is that Eric and Dylan knew they were going to die. Whether or not they were going to take their own lives, or they were going to get like shot out by the police,
I'll tell you one of the. I'm sorry to interrupt, but one of the things that like it's been probably 10 years, maybe longer, but I've actually watched from beginning to end the security footage with the audio from the Columbine High School, and I'll never forget. At one point, they're trying to decide what to do after they killed a bunch of kids in the library, I want to say.
Yeah.
And one of them, I don't remember who one of them says, "I'm not done yet. I'm not done." Like, are you ready to kill yourself? No, I'm not done killing people yet. Like,
It was probably, if I had to guess, it was probably Eric saying he was not done.
Based on that, but it's like, wow. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. It's just one of those. It's one of those things. You hear something, it sticks with you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can imagine. I remember seeing. I mean, I haven't seen those videos, but I do remember seeing the photos after they died. And that was.
Oh, that's one of those. Yeah.
Like rotten.com type thing.
Oh yeah, rotten.com.
Yeah, I don't even think that website's around anymore.
Documentingreality.com.
Oh, dude, I'm still a fucking member. I don't know if that site's been blocked in America yet.
It
but,
probably should be.
Oh, yeah, maybe. I know it's blocked in a couple countries. So yeah, just Eric and Dylan, basement tapes, a lot of anger. I think we're going to wrap this up really here quick because there's not a whole lot more to talk about because next episode is going to be the meat and potatoes type thing. But what I do want to do is in the back of this book of Columbine, there's a timeline. So we can just kind of briefly talk about the timeline quick.
Okay.
And then we'll kind of just end the episode.
Timeline for the shooting?
Timeline of everything that led up before the shooting.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right.
So it starts with their sophomore year. In January of 1997, the mission begins.
Oh, okay, that's one other thing that I do remember from when I was a kid, or at least this is in the aftermath of it, but that I remember they were both on probation at some point because they robbed a...
I'm sure it's in the timeline.
I want to say it was their junior year, or it was right before their senior year. So obviously their junior year.
Right.
They robbed an electronics from a van.
Right. So it's something that you remember from that time?
Yeah.
Okay. February 28th, 1997, Wayne Harris starts his journal.
Who's Wayne Harris?
Wayne Harris. His dad. It's Eric's dad.
Hey, wait, so... duh, of course. Eric Harris. Wayne Harris is...
Right, that's his dad. Yeah.
Right.
March 31st, 1997, Dylan starts his journal. The summer of 97, Eric and Dylan start at Blackjack, which was a local pizza place that they both worked at, and they built their first pipe bomb. July 23rd, 1997, Dylan first mentions killing in his journal, possibly figuratively. And then August 7th, 1997, Eric's website is reported to the police. It lists his "I hate" rants. And like he would have all these like rants on his website about people he wanted to kill, people he hated, things like that. And a concerned citizen saw this and reported it to the local authorities. And that was like the first time that his name was documented in Littleton, Colorado, through the sheriff's department. So their junior year, October 2nd, 1997, Eric, Dylan, and Zach are suspended for breaking into lockers. So in the beginning, it was 3. Zach was also a part of this, and we didn't really talk about him much. November 3rd, 1997, Dylan first mentions a killing spree in his journal. Now, I should mention, after Eric, Dylan, and Zach broke into the lockers, they were suspended, and all 3 were grounded. And then Eric...
Ooh.
I know. Well, Eric and Dylan were restricted from their online privileges and things like that. And this is kind of like where Zach kind of fades away, kind of distance himself from them too. So this is where Eric and Dylan really become very, very close. And it becomes them as the deadly duo.
Us against the world kind of
basically, thing. Yeah. And it has this unknown time, but sometime at the end of 1997 and the early 1998, Eric and Dylan steal from the school computer room. January 3rd.
Yeah, they were both real good kids.
Yeah, right.
That's something I think we need to talk about later, is that their parents or at least Dylan Klebold's parents have been they've never shied away from what they did. But you always hear they were good kids, and it's like, well, I mean, but they were on probation. They've obviously got.
I think the parents. It's kind of like seeing losing the forest through the trees type thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. January 30th.
But that's still an important distinction to make.
Yes, absolutely. January 30th, 1998. Literally the day after my 7th birthday. Eric and Dylan are arrested for breaking into a van. So that memory that you had. February 15th, 1998. Deputies find a pipe bomb near Eric's house. February 16th, 1998, the next day, Eric begins seeing a psychiatrist and soon starts taking Zoloft. So it does mention in this book, when his dad, Wayne, started his journal, he had a list going of things that needed to happen. Probation, psychiatry, Zoloft, all that stuff was on his dad's list. Spring of 1998, the dates are unknown, so it's approximate. Eric's dad catches him with a pipe bomb.
So the parents did have at least some inkling.
Or
at least his parents did.
Right.
That's probably why you only hear from Dylan Klebold's family. You never hear anything about Eric Harris's family.
Yeah. I think it's probably one of those things, too, where they just want to distance themselves as much as possible.
Right.
Same thing with Jeffrey Dahmer's brother. He changed his name. He wants nothing to do with that.
Oh, I didn't even know Jeffrey Dahmer. Oh, that's true, because his mother took his little brother and left when... That's a whole different thing.
So, March 18th, 1998, Dylan warns Brooks Brown about Eric's death threats. March 19th, 1998, Eric and Dylan conduct their intake interview for the diversion program. So because they were on probation and everything, they had to go through this program. It's so they both went through this, and their parents were there with them.
Right.
So the parents did have...
Diversionary programs. That mean that they weren't... If they finished the diversion program, they weren't actually charged criminally for what they did?
I don't know. I'd have to actually read
that
chapter.
A lot of diversion programs, you go through the diversion program so that you can avoid actual criminal charges.
Probably that would make sense.
All right.
Yeah, probably. March 25th, 1998, Eric and Dylan are formally sentenced in court. April 1998, investigator Guerra drafts an affidavit for a warrant to search Eric's house. April 8th, 1998, Eric receives his diversion program contract. And then on April 10th, Eric begins his journal. By May 9th of 98, Eric and Dylan outline the attack, write about it in each other's yearbooks. May 14th, 98, Eric has switched from Zoloft to Luvox. I'm not familiar with Luvox.
I bet you it's Luvoxamine.
Probably. I'm not familiar with it at all.
It's one of those drugs where I know the name, but I don't recognize it as...
We will investigate that for next episode.
There you go.
Now we're into their senior year. October 22nd, 1998. Eric begins pipe bomb arsenal production, resumes journal writing the next day. November 13th. Eric turns in his paper on Nazis. So it does say in the book, and I know the media really played this up, Eric would do the whole Heil or... Sieg Heil type thing, and the duck walk.
They used to do it in school and shit. I remember that's another one of those things from when I was a kid. They were doing this in school, and somehow their parents didn't know, the authorities, I don't know if they were told, the school, they would do it in class.
Oh, okay. November 17th, 1998, Eric describes his sadistic rape fantasies in his journal. Ugh. I feel like if he would have kept going, he would have been definitely a Ted Bundy. For sure.
I don't know enough, but I mean, it was clear he was a severely disturbed person.
If they wouldn't have done the mass shooting,
somebody would have died eventually.
Oh, for sure. I feel like Eric would have been a serial killer.
Oh, okay.
If they wouldn't have done the mass shooting, I feel like Eric would have been a serial killer, for sure. And I feel like Dylan would have just killed himself.
Or worse,
absolutely. Definitely a murder-suicide, I think. But I feel like, because Dylan just wanted to die. He wanted his pain to end. And Eric was just a fucking psychopath. November 22nd, 1998, Eric and Dylan buy 2 shotguns and a rifle at the Tanner Gun Show. December 2nd, Eric fires his weapon for the first time. January 23rd, 1999, Eric and Dylan buy Tech 9 from Mark Maines. Now, Mark Maines was the person who was actually sued or brought on criminal charges for selling the gun.
Tech 9?
Is that where that rapper gets his name from? Yeah. Oh. Okay.
Not from that, but from the submachine gun Tech 9.
Interesting. January 20th, 1999, Eric and Dylan complete the diversion program, and Dylan resumes his journal. February 7th, 1999, Dylan submits his story about killing preps. Must have been some sort of like school article or something like that.
If I remember correctly, that sounds familiar. I think it was a creative writing class.
Oh.
And he wrote a fictional story about killing jocks or the popular kids in school.
Yeah, because they fucking hated them so much. March 6th, 99, Eric and Dylan practice shooting at Rampart Range. March 15th, Eric and Dylan begin filming the basement tapes. March 20th, Eric attempts to recruit Chris Morris as their third. April 5th, 8th, and 15th, Eric talks to a Marine recruiter. So, like, at this point, because they were seniors and they were, like, on the cusp of graduating, like the whole college thing, like, what are you gonna do after high school? Everyone had plans, everyone was breathing down their necks. Dylan actually went to go tour various campuses. Like, I think he went to Tucson with his dad. And then Eric's parents were like up his ass, like, what are you gonna do? You're so smart. So he like agreed to get off their back. If he would go talk to a Marine recruiter if they would get off his back. So kind of literally put it on a face. April 17th, 1999 is the prom. And then on April 20th, 1999, the massacre begins. I feel like we've talked about a lot, but again, I feel like we haven't talked about anything.
I was honestly thinking the exact same thing. Like, we've gone through a lot of different things. Some of them topical, some of them not topical, but all relevant in various ways.
Right.
But, like I said, the before, which is arguably the most important, is the least researched.
Right. Well, and also I think a big part of it too is like you and I are doing like this new format where I'm not super scripted.
Yeah.
And so it's weird not having like things written down and just having reference. But then also I think the biggest thing too is because I have to return these books so soon. It is literally putting a fire under my ass to like get this research out. So I really hope next episode will be a little bit more scripted, or I'll have at least more notes.
Timelines. I mean, there's definitely the research available for the next part is gonna be It's like an encyclopedia set versus like an online article.
Right.
The amount of information that's available.
Right. So yeah, I think next episode we'll have a lot more, I guess, discussion about what actually is going on in the events other than our personal opinions and how we are currently relating it to like current events. Right. So, but yeah, that's basically all I had for this episode. Are there any at last?
I don't think I have anything to add.
Well, that's fair.
Other than it's one of those things where it's like, I regret that we even have to discuss it.
Yeah.
Especially considering all the things that have happened since then.
Right. Well, and it sucks too because I know a couple of people who have their birthdays on April 20th.
Yeah. And
it's like, Jesus Christ, being a kid, having your birthday, and then seeing this blow up on the news. And not only that, but to share your birthday with fucking Adolf Hitler. And then 420 being, marijuana, whatever. Smoking dope.
Cheech and Chong it?
Yeah.
It could be worse. Your birthday could be on 9/11.
Like Dylan Klebold. So, anywho, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys do like this new format with Kyle and I and just kind of keep it more casual, I suppose, and more back and forth. As always, please help share Murder's My Sign with anyone you can, any way that you can. You can find Murder's My Sign anywhere you get your podcasts or on your favorite podcasting app. You know what? That brings me to the next point. And I didn't mention this in the beginning, but I'm going to mention this now. Having just listened to my April Fool's Day episode with you on Podcast Addict, I gotta say, guys, I am so sorry for the amount of ads that were playing.
Oh, yeah.
Or that have played. So
there wasn't a ridiculous.
So
considering how short it was a joke. It was a joke episode. It wasn't a real episode, but there were so many ads.
And I didn't add any mid-rolls. So here's how my whole ad thing with Sprecher works. They add the beginning, and then they add the end roll. So there will be an ad in the beginning, and there will be an ad at the end. I'm supposed to be in charge of adding a mid-roll, and a mid-roll should go where there's like a break, so it doesn't like cut off my sentence. But in this episode that you and I were listening to on my April Fool's Day one, it would cut me off and then mid-sentence. I was like, what the fuck? And so, guys, I'm so sorry. I understand how annoying that is. I just want to acknowledge that. And because I know how annoying ads can be. So, anyhow. Thank you so much for listening. Continue to share and support Murders My Sign with anyone you can, any way that you can. You can always connect with me on social media, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, all at Jordy Death. That's Jordy Death. Or you can always email the show directly at murdersmysignpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us in the Boneyard by joining patreon.com/murdersmysign and becoming a Boneyard backer or a Death Head, just like my fabulous patrons, Jake, Michelle, Crystal, and Holly. We will continue the conversation of Columbine Killers next week, and we hope that you'll join us. Until then, take care of yourself and each other, and rest in peace.